Figure whose journey defies convention. As a teenager at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Philip Lowe made his first scientific discovery, setting the stage for a career that would challenge the boundaries of brain science. At the Salk Institute, under the guidance of luminaries like Francis Crick, Lowe authored a groundbreaking one-page PhD thesis on dynamic brain activity mapping, a feat that would revolutionize our understanding of neural dynamics. This led to the creation of Neurovigil and the development of the iBrain, a portable brain activity monitor poised to transform neurodiagnostics. Among his circle was Elon Musk, a relationship that began with shared visions but later became a subject of public intrigue. In a candid revelation, Lowe stated, "Elon believes he is above everyone else." Philip explained that he fired Elon from Neurovigil. In his now viral post on social media, Dr. Philip also revealed that Elon Musk's motivations are primarily driven by power and control rather than ideology. He further revealed that Elon's AI and neurotech ventures are driven by competition and not innovation. This disclosure cast a spotlight on the complexities of their association, offering a rare glimpse into the personal dynamics between two influential figures in technology. Dr. Philip Lowe's journey is a testament to relentless curiosity and the courage to challenge the status quo, navigating the intricate dance between scientific discovery and the human elements that accompany it. In the ever-evolving narrative of neuroscience and technology, his story remains a compelling chapter. Now let's welcome Dr. Philip Lowe to have a brief but insightful conversation with us on these and many other topics.
Awesome stuff. So good to have you, Dr. Philip Lowe. Look, you are breaking the internet right now. Across the world, we see news of you and your who we consider your former friend. Dr. Philip, can we just get to know you? Who are you?
Sure. Well,
and what do you do?
Delighted to be with you, Dr. Awuzie. Thank you very much for your invitation and for all the hard work you've put in to make this syzygy, happen. I guess you could call me a troublemaker, clearly, given the unwanted attention I've been receiving. I'm a technologist, so I am an accidental CEO, and before then I was an accidental neuroscientist, and before then I was a mathematician. So I started my career, as you pointed out, as a teenager. I did some research at Harvard Medical School, and I discovered that a particular compound could be very effective against fibroid tumors, which affect about 50% of women, and if it happens before menopause, it leads to their infertility. And even at Harvard Medical School, I found that there was quite a bit of reticence in terms of using mathematics to really model something. And so I was drawn to computational neuroscience, which was an emerging field at the time, and they loved mathematicians and physicists and so on. So I invented a new method to collect brainwaves, initially from birds, and I was able to show that they had brain patterns that were extremely intricate, and that was, it was a shock to many because it was believed up until that point that one required the most evolutionarily advanced brain structures in order to produce the most evolutionarily advanced brain rhythms. And I showed that, in fact, that wasn't the case at all. And then I thought, okay, well, now I have to analyze all of these patterns in an unbiased way. And so I developed a new type of mathematics to analyze these patterns. And then I applied those algorithms to human brains. And then I found out that it was possible to capture a tremendous amount of information without making a hole in anybody's head and without putting sensors all over them. And so I did this very strange thing. I was very fortunate towards the end of my PhD because I had been asked to consider positions, at places like, Oxford, Harvard, Caltech, Max Planck, etc. And instead, I thought, if I can change one life, I have a civic duty to do that. I have a moral duty to do that. So I continued with that little startup that I had created when I was a graduate student. And our first customer was Roche, the big pharma company. And our second customer was Novartis. And this was very, very um, ironic because when I was, almost 10 years old, my father was incarcerated and he lost all of his wealth after he threatened a banker with a gun. It's never a very good idea to threaten a banker in Switzerland, especially with a gun. He didn't draw the gun. He had it in a briefcase. But eventually, his conviction was thrown out when it was revealed that he was under the influence of some very powerful, a very powerful sleeping drug that made people, prone to violence. Of course, I didn't believe this, even as a child, because I always knew my father as a very violent man. And 20 years later, I was talking to, an expert in neuropsychology and pharmacology. Actually, it was less than 20 years later because, I was doing my PhD, and I was going to put some mice on this particular drug, on this compound, which had been removed from the market for humans. And one of my advisors said, Philip, you cannot use this drug. It makes people completely, psychotic and violent. So I picked up the phone, I called my father, and I asked him, to forgive me for having doubted him all those years. And it was ironic that, in fact, so 20 years after this, I'm at the helm of this company and I'm helping pharma companies sort of avoid that type of disaster. And I remember I was at the conference that I organized in Monaco, like any cash-strapped startup does. It organizes a conference in Monaco, and I remember running from my room to the auditorium, and I noticed a little speck on the peninsula in in Monaco, and I realized, wow, this was our house. This was our house that was seized by the banks 20 years ago, and now I'm helping people, avoid this kind of drama. Then as all of this was happening, Stephen Hawking approached me and asked me to help unlock him if he ever became locked in. So ALS is a progressive disease, and eventually, unfortunately, people lose the ability to communicate entirely. And so I took on that challenge, and Stephen, luckily, never became fully locked in before he passed. He was still able to move his cheek muscle and communicate with that. But in 2013, we already had our first patient who was able to communicate with this technology, again, without putting a hole in anybody's head. And for years now, we worked on a new generation of iBrain devices. So iBrain is the first portable, brain monitor. So we're working on releasing now the iBrain 3, and we're going to be using it for everything that iBrain 1 could do, which is help people communicate, work on pharmaco EEG, so making sure that looking for abnormal activity in the brains of people who are taking particular drugs. But we also are going to be using it for things like Alzheimer's, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, for traumatic brain injury, brain cancer, Parkinson's. So we're going to look at biomarkers for all of those diseases. We are not going to make any diagnostic. That's going to be always, as far as this is concerned, in the hands of physicians. But we will act as a research tool, and the idea is that we will be able to provide iBrain, at a sort of the cost of a latte per day, and also provide the consultation with expert physicians, and help as many people as possible. So that's sort of the story with the company. We've been very, very lucky. I bootstrapped it. I started with about $250,000 of credit card debt at 28% interest. I became an expert at using credit cards when I was a student in Chicago, and the police tried to evict me from my apartment twice because I couldn't afford rent anymore. I was living in frozen French fries, which was sort of an unusual trajectory for a kid who grew up in castles. But it was a great lesson. Anyway, so when I started the company, then I was very lucky. I won the DFJ Venture Challenge, which is a very renowned business plan competition in Silicon Valley. And instead of paying myself, I put the money, straight into the company. Then, 3 days later, I won another first another prize at a competition in San Diego, and also same thing. I put the money immediately in the company, and
Philip,
that
do
gets
you
more
have
done.
the amount of what those monies, the amount
Sure,
of
sure.
this money?
So the first one was 250,000.
Okay.
It was winner take all. The second one, I won the first prize, and that was 30,000. But I really spread each dollar as far as I could, and then after that, I chose my investors extremely carefully, extremely carefully. There were a lot of people who were interested, but I kicked everybody out except for 3 investors because I thought that they could be phenomenal mentors. I looked at every investor as, the question I asked myself is, if I already had the money, would I want to learn something from that person? And if the answer was a resounding yes, then that was the basis on which I invited a person to invest.
And was that at that point that you got Elon Musk in? At what point
Pardon?
did you get him in?
Well, the amount I asked, the amount was so the first round was about less than 800,000. I think it was about 775,000, if I recall correctly, and it was. But I had asked all the investors to put a convertible note for 50% more than that, that would go into the Series A. So that way, I had some buffer. But it was actually very funny because for about a year or so, I did not cash the checks that the investors had sent because I wanted to show them that I was going to do this with or without them. And eventually,
I got you there.
they had to rewrite checks, in order for them to be deposited. And then there was so the seed round was the highest valuation of any startup in history at that time. It was a 40 million post money seed, and then that was in 2011. Then we did a Series A in 2015. There was a $500 million pre-money valuation, and that was a couple $1 million, but it was that was the highest Series A at the time. And then we did a Series B last year, the $6 billion pre, and that was for tens of millions of dollars. A lot of it came in the form of services with all of the physicians and institutions that we're working with.
So
But
Philip, I'm just going to cut you a bit there
please go ahead.
because
Yeah.
there are a couple of guys on Reddit who think the $6 billion valuation is a bit on the high side. What do you have to say to them?
Nietzsche said, the higher you soar, the smaller you appear to those who cannot fly. That's all I have to say to them.
That's a powerful one right there, Dr. Philip. I read and I've been a student of your Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness. I have interest in consciousness, and I've studied cryonics,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to ask you something on the aspects of preserving human consciousness.
Sure.
With regards to cryonics, do you think that it's possible to cryonologically preserve human consciousness for future reactivation?
The honest answer is I don't know. The if you take the reductionistic view that consciousness comes from as Francis Crick would call it, the pack of neurons, then technically it should be possible, but I don't know if it can be done. What is interesting though is up until the Cambridge Declaration, it was believed that there was something special about the human brain, and that only the human brain could produce consciousness. And I challenged that idea, and I showed that in fact There are plenty of other species that tend to exhibit behaviors, um, that suggest that they would, in fact, have consciousness. And if you look at human brains, where there's a lesion, in the areas that are most different between us and animals, the behaviors which seem to require consciousness are still preserved. So this idea that humans would be the only conscious species, was something that we had inherited from Descartes, who had inherited from the church. There was no scientific validity to it whatsoever. And so, if you look at it that way, then to the extent that consciousness is not something that is unique to humans, but something that you can see in many other species, including, for example, an octopus, then it means that, the likelihood that consciousness can be produced, in an artificial system is actually much higher than one would have thought before. That's one observation. And the other one is the likelihood that we may find consciousness, in outside of Earth, is also higher than one would have imagined, before. So, that's quite interesting, because then it sort of obliquely answers your question. Because if there are multiple pathways to consciousness, then it might be able to be preserved outside the human body, or even chronologically.
Yeah, I think I got quite interested when you mentioned the church, because my background is the church. I came from the church background before I embraced science completely. I used to be a preacher, actually,
I
and
see.
yeah, and one of the things I remember back in those days that was a big thing was what happens after life. What happens after life, and the study of human consciousness, and the fact that, I mean, I just asked about cryonics because I believe in it, and I used to, by the way. I'm going to come to that later. But the fact that the human consciousness can be manipulated to a great extent, preserved after declaration of biological death, and with the hope that someday it could be reactivated, through science. With all of that developing in an age like this, the teachings of religion about a post-life experience or a post-life consciousness,
Interesting. I see where you're going with
yeah,
this. Yeah.
and that comes
Mhm.
to question. So my question to you, Dr. Philip, is um, with your knowledge of consciousness, of human consciousness, what happens after death? Do humans still retain, some kind of consciousness, to be able to enjoy either some life in paradise or some punishment in hell? Just want to have your view on that.
I'm a scientist, so I can only speak about data and analysis of data. So as a scientist, we don't have that data. So I cannot answer that question as a scientist. As a human being who has all kinds of ideas, of course, I have interests and opinions. But I would say, that to me, it seems that, the four dimensions um, that we live in, three of space and one of time, might be a subset of the way we interact. And so, therefore, one could argue that if a person dies in these, in four dimensions, he or she may not be dead in all the others. I'll give you an example of something that happened that it was, recently, which was quite shocking.
Yeah.
Um, last year, in January, I went to Switzerland. My father was in the ICU, and I chartered a medical jet and brought him to America. This was because the Swiss medical system had told me there's nothing we can do for your father anymore. So I brought him to America, and he lived for another 4 months. Um, and somebody says only the human brain can produce consciousness. That's not true. But anyways, I invite that person to read the Cambridge Declaration. Anyways, so to go back with the story, I lost my father, and he was in his body was in a mortuary, and I was waiting for a jet to fly from London so that I could put his coffin on it, and bring him to Switzerland for a funeral. And I had this dream that he was much younger and he wanted to go home. And interestingly, my mother called me and she said, "I had a dream of your father. He was much younger and he wanted to go home." And it was very, very strange. And when I brought him home, to Switzerland, and he was buried, I had a dream afterwards that he was older but very, very fresh and vibrant, and on a train, and my mother um, uh, called me again, and she said, "I had a dream of your father, older and very happy that he was home." And it's not like, so it was very strange. It's as if she and I our unconscious brains were coming up with pretty much the same things. And there are a lot of things we can't understand, and it's part of the mystery and beauty of life. But on the other hand, if you take the position that you can't sample time without consciousness, and that consciousness is the product of your neurons, and then once they stop interacting, there's no more consciousness, then there's nothing else, after death. But either way, I think the most important thing that we can do is to live within, and make each moment matter. And this is why I'm speaking out now about this other issue.
Awesome stuff. And my last question on the issue, on the topic of consciousness, is on dreams,
Right.
because you touched on that area. Then we're going to go to the other
Please,
topic.
yeah.
And on dreams, we have this team in Australia. I'm founder of the Transhuman Coin, and we have a great team in Australia, in Sydney, working with Dr. Avinash at the University of Technology in Sydney. They've built this dream machine, which literally records your dream while you're sleeping, right? And my question to you,
I haven't seen data, so I can't comment one way or another. But please go ahead.
yeah, great stuff. So my question to you, because you are the brain king, in what ways do you think we can use brain machine interface technology to help solve brain diseases
This is
in
a good
a way
question.
that will be affordable to the African continent? A lot of people want to hear that, because
Well, they must be affordable for the African continent. That would be unethical to produce technologies and disenfranchise, the African continent. So absolutely, that has to be done. So what I would say is, I think we are at a very interesting point right now, because the brain has been treated like a black box. Pretty much like with an airplane. If the airplane crashes, then people find a black box, they find out what happened, and so on. There are all kinds of diseases that where we don't find that we don't find out that what happened until after a person died. And so or until the disease is no longer curable. So, for example, people may have a tumor that's going very, very slowly in the brain, and it's not until a lot of redundant layers are affected that all of a sudden one day a person wakes up and does not recognize half of the visual hemifield, for example, does not recognize his or her face, and so on. So what we're working on is technologies that will enable people to find out if something has changed before they have symptoms. And so in that case, you can have a doctor order an MRI for you, bring you in for a consultation, find out if something is actually happening. before a catastrophic event occurs, and then
Yeah.
it means that the probability of a successful outcome is much greater, and the cost of interfering is much lower. So that's going from a reactive model to a proactive model,
Yeah.
and that's what we're working on, and I think that will be very much part of the future of neurotechnology. We will look back at this time when people had no idea what was happening in their brain as prehistoric, just like the way we look, for example, at how life was before there were cell phones.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea is to be completely connected to our brain to the extent that we know that something unusual is happening. So these are the technologies that we work on. These are the types of biomarkers that we are hunting.
Great stuff, Dr. Philip. And look, I love your work. I've followed your work over the years. You, Peter Diamandis, Rick as well. I love you guys. I love what you do.
Thank you.
And now let's talk about the viral topic, which is your relationship with your former friend. I mean, the media calls you Elon's former best friend. I heard you say you picked your investors very carefully. How
Correct.
careful were you when you picked Elon Musk? And why did it
I,
turn out to
I,
be
I
Elon?
didn't pick him. He asked me to invest. We were having dinner. We were having dinner in Los Angeles, in Bel Air, and we would hang out, quite a bit. And he said, "How's your visual doing?" We're talking. He says, "I want to play," And I said,
Oh,
"What
okay.
do you mean?" And,
He, 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 he
he asked,
asked to
yeah,
invest.
he asked, and he was a good
Interesting.
friend. He was a good friend, and I thought, well, I guess that it won't hurt. I
Yeah.
generally didn't accept investments from friends, you know, uh, but I thought, this is a small amount that we're talking about. He wants to feel he's part of it. Fine, let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I allowed it. That's how it started. And we had a you know. I put him on the advisory board, the business advisory board. He had stock options as well.
Okay.
And what happened was that he, over time, things got a little bit strange. There was one event where we were at a party, and people ended up in a pool, and women didn't have swimsuits, so they were naked, and I was just minding my business in the pool,
Yeah.
and his wife swims to me, and I thought, oh, what do I do now? So if I stay, I'm offending him maybe, and if I leave, I'm offending her. So I just stayed and looked at the sky while talking to her. Still, still, we
That
didn't
must have
speak.
been an awkward situation to be in.
It
With
was,
your
yeah,
best friend's
actually,
wife in her
yeah.
creation
I didn't
garment.
ask. I didn't ask for any of this. I was a little perplexed. So I thought the most diplomatic way to handle this was just to look at the sky and talk. And after that, he and I didn't speak for quite a few months. I think it was 6 or 8. I think it was actually 8 months.
Yeah.
We didn't speak. Um, but then when we were divorced, I was in Vienna in 2017, and then I was going to go to London for a fundraiser for
Mhm.
neuroscience for Hebrew University, and I told Elon that I was going to invite his ex-wife, uh, and I asked her to also check with him because as friends, as buddies, I didn't want this to cause any antibodies, and she was not the only person I had invited. So at that dinner, she the photos are taken, and she says, "Oh, so she kisses me on the cheek, and then she says, "Oh, now it's your turn." Was it fine?
Okay,
And then
that's interesting.
yeah, and
Do
when I
you
kiss
think
her,
she liked you? Honestly, Dr. Philip, do you think she
yeah,
liked you? I mean,
I
you're
don't.
a handsome guy.
You're very kind, but I don't know. We're just friends. I
Yeah.
certainly did not. I didn't certainly did not see her in that way, and I wouldn't let myself see another a friend's wife or even ex-wife in that way. I don't know if she was playing or what she was thinking, but anyways. But then when she said, "Okay, it's your turn," so I kiss her on the cheek. I grew up in Europe, so kissing on the cheek doesn't mean anything. It's. But then she turned her head, and so I pushed her away, and I said, "Do you want a missile to fall on my house tomorrow?" You're out of your mind. So right after that, Elon announced Neuralink. Right after that, and that was surprising. He had already started it, I guess, a year prior, but still, I think after the pool incident. Yeah. And to the extent that they could do things that, we're in different markets, but to the extent that they can help some people that we're not helping, I thought, okay, great. But I'm surprised that you wouldn't tell me about this. I'm a neuroscientist. He's an investor. Okay, fine. Mm-hmm. But what happened was that 3 years ago, something very strange took place. This was in December 2021, and Elon had received the draft of a press release that we're going to put out. Now, we are business to business. We're not, a business to consumer. So we don't really need to be in the news. We don't, we have to have a lot of public outreach. And then so every once in a while we public release, like once every few years, So this one, in this draft, it did say that we don't take any money from the federal government. We've never taken any money from the federal government, which is actually very different from, Tesla and SpaceX and so on. Elon's companies. So Elon then writes, take me off the advisory board. I'm not contributing. So I said, okay, fine. That's not a problem. But then afterwards, he had one of his minions, who happens to be the CEO of Neuralink, and who is sort of his wealth manager or something like that. He said Elon is going to give his stock back. You can buy it, or otherwise it will be like at $0. At $0, is he trying to crash the company? In other words, if I have stock in something, and I don't think it's worth anything, it's never going to be negative. So I can just hold it, and something happens, great. And if it doesn't, okay. But if I'm giving it back, and I'm telling everyone, hey, your stock is worth nothing, then, that can be seen as stock manipulation, especially if I'm very famous by now, So I thought that's very weird what he's doing. I felt very surprised by this kind of behavior. And I told him, I'm not going to let you do this, So the stock is not moving anywhere. And by the way, since you have admitted that you are not contributing to the advisory board, you're fired, and you're fired with cause. You're not quitting. You're fired with cause. Now, with when you fire someone with cause, depending on what kind of documents you have, there are all kinds of things that happen. So since he had admitted that he wasn't contributing, I could fire him with cause. But it also meant that he was no longer able to exercise his stock options, So I just realized that, it appeared that he was trying to sabotage the company. And to the extent that he was trying to do this, he had to be immediately contained, Now, if you look at Elon's career, it's interesting because he has destabilized a number of companies. Twitter was very much destabilized, before he took it over. Some people complain that he has done that at Tesla. He calls himself a founder of Tesla, but that's incorrect. 100% incorrect. I want to be very clear about it.
I agree with you on that. I agree.
Yeah. Even there was Eberhard and Tarpenning. They're the founders of Tesla. End of story. And what's interesting, when he and I would hang out at the beginning of our relationship, before he was a household name, it was, he didn't pretend to be some sort of tech whiz, So he came to my birthday party once in LA, and I showed him some data afterwards that I had collected, on him, and at the time he had 5 boys, and I had screened all of them. And he said, "Oh, I don't have the technical, expertise to interpret this data." So he was very, honest about those things. Over the years, I watched him create this sort of mythology about himself, according to which, despite having received a BA in economics at 26, all of a sudden he is an expert, in rocket engineering, in material science, and electronics, in AI, in neuroscience. And it's a bit weird, because if you look at the patents, for example, he's got 14 granted patents. I think 5 of them predate, these companies that he has right now. If you look at the granted patents for Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, it's about 1,406. So his contribution is less than 1%. Even his chatbot X says it's less than 5%. So yet he calls himself the chief engineer of SpaceX, and the product architect of Tesla. If I had a chief engineer, or a product architect who contributed that little, I would fire that person. I mean, so it's very, very weird. And so he is a great manipulator. And he wanted his own planet. He wanted Mars to be his planet, and that was the goal. He wanted people to at some point say that they were Martians, and who was going to be the ruler of the Martians? It was going to be Elon. In fact, he's named after, his name comes from a character in a book who rules Mars. So he grew up in South Africa during apartheid. And
Dr. Philip, I'm just going to cut you a bit there, because you had mentioned Mars, and I saw you in a picture with him,
yes,
where you're wearing an Occupy Mars T-shirt. At
yes.
what point did you become anti-Mars? Because at this time, when you were with him and you had the Occupy Mars T-shirt, I think you had faith in his Mars vision. At what point did you?
So let me explain.
Okay.
I had driven from Silicon Valley to LA. This show was done. The interview that he and I gave at the residence of Canada. So the Consul General's residence of Canada in the United States, in Los Angeles. And I took a shower. I wanted to change, and that was the Consul General's T-shirt. He gave me that.
Oh, okay.
So okay, fine, it works for the interview. That wasn't my T-shirt. But here's the thing: it's not that I'm a very, very direct person. So whenever I had problems with Elon, when for example, when he said things during the pandemic against healthcare officials, I told him, hey, you cannot do this. That a lot of people think you are a tech whiz. They're going to now doubt that there's a pandemic. You're putting them at risk. I understand you want to keep the factories open, but this is public health that comes first. So I told him, when he gave himself a stock option package, which now is worth $56 billion, I thought, hey, this could have gone to people who are actually doing the innovations and doing the work. So I didn't hold back. I told him, in private, always things. I think that's what a good friend does. A good friend, keeps you accountable. And in 2017, I thought the way he treated other people started being less respectful than usual. I told him that. I said, I don't like the way you're treating people. It's not good. It's not a good look. And a lot of people are rooting for you, and you should. There's a great, there's a great responsibility that you have now as a public figure. And don't betray their trust. So I was always very direct, but I spoke out publicly.
Great.
Because
someone is asking a question here, Dr. Philip.
Sorry.
This guy asks, hope this man is not speaking from the place of envy on Elon's success afterwards. Can you just address that, because I've seen a couple of those questions and a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of
it's
people
very
don't know
funny.
how successful you are yourself and your family. Can you just touch on that?
Well, look, I mean, I'm a multi-billionaire. I am in a beautiful relationship. I have some, I'm an actual inventor. I have 72 patents, and I certainly don't want Elon's life, running around making one crazy, prediction after another, trying to get everybody excited to keep the bubble from bursting. So no, the reason I've spoken out, and I could have spoken out years ago when there was this stock thing that happened, and I didn't. What really the reason I have spoken out is, well, to be clear, I happen to think Elon is not an actual, is not the tech genius he says he is. So I wouldn't want to be that person, but I've spoken out because of the Nazi salutes. That for me was the last straw, Or you do that behind the seal of the president of the United States. America has bled, to rid the world of Nazism along with many other countries. You do that, I had to speak up. That's how it started, But to go back to what I was saying, Elon grew up in South Africa during apartheid. It was a horrible culture, unfortunately. It was also a macho culture. He wasn't one of the cool kids. He wasn't really validated by his father. He sort of hates his father. And he sort of escaped into sci-fi, and that's when his obsession, with conquering a planet, started. And I think over time, people have explained to him that Mars was not going to be terraformed, or at least not in his lifetime. And now he's trying to come after our planet, So he has convinced President Trump that he was the architect of his, 2024 election, just like he has convinced Tesla shareholders worldwide that he is the creative genius behind Tesla. And he's doing now with the U.S. government what he's done with a number of companies before he's taken them over. He is destabilizing it. The fact that over the weekend he had his people go to the Treasury Department, access very sensitive data that is even for people with a security clearance on a need-to-know basis. And at the same time, he has, had the president of the United States make a statement about South Africa. So he is sort of signaling to everyone that he's in charge, that he's the puppeteer.
Yeah.
He's the MBS.
We're going to come to that, but I want to address John. John said, Dr. Philip,
yes.
He is autistic and can be very blunt. However, you sounded as if he was a scam by expressing surprise that someone with a background in economics could become a tech engineer. Did he not study energy physics at the University of Pennsylvania? How do you address that? Have you ever said that he's a scam? Have you ever called him a scam?
So I didn't have to, because he never pretended to me that he was this tech whiz. When I would show him data, he would say, "Oh, I can't. I don't have the training to analyze this." So he never played that game with me. He did study physics. I don't know if he got his degree in physics. I know he got the degree in economics for sure, and it was late. It was at 26, and he might have gotten the degree in physics later. He says he got into Stanford, but I don't know that he actually did get into Stanford for a graduate program. And he said, okay, now this is weird. So when he visited me in the lab and I was scanning everybody's brain, he I noticed that he had one child who was very bubbly and very engaging. He drew something on a whiteboard. I actually have it. And he had one child who was much more withdrawn. I believe this is the child who ended up having a gender transition afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And he said, "Oh, yes, he's autistic," you know. And I thought, okay, well, fine. But looking back now, you know, if you are in the laboratory of an award-winning neuroscientist and
Yeah.
he's screening your brain and your children's brain, and he happens to be a buddy of yours, and you're confiding all kinds of things, about women problems on which I will not discuss, um, to him, and you tell him that one of your children is autistic, if it ran in the family, wouldn't you tell him, "Oh, I have it too"?
Yeah.
So I actually don't know if he has received years ago a diagnosis for Asperger's. Now he could tell anybody, any doctor, "Hey, give me a diagnosis." They would say yes, sure, right away. But I don't know if he's ever received it. To me, it looks like he might, and maybe he has, but there are some people with Asperger's who have a very high IQ, and there are some who don't have a very high IQ. I have the feeling that he's using that to pretend that he's some sort of autistic savant, which he's
Yeah.
not. You know,
Yeah, I got it. I
so
got it. I was once in touch with his mentor. I mean, I have my WhatsApp. The SpaceX mentor, Jim Cantrell. Jim.
mhm. Yeah,
I think he's building out his own space company right now. And
uh-huh.
I know he did mention something about Elon. He said, "Look, Elon is a smart guy and he can learn at the speed of light." Did you at any point feel the same way about him?
Not really.
You think he's just a
Uh,
genius who just can learn whatever,
Look, I've
at the
worked with
speed of light?
geniuses. I've worked with Francis Crick and Stephen Hawking and so on. That's not who Elon is. And if he had that capability, why is he on 1% of the patents of his companies? He's
Got it.
saying that he doesn't do patents. Then why are his companies doing patents, but just not with his name on so no, I think where he has genius is as a marketer. He's the best marketer I've ever seen. He
Got
can
it.
he can sell ice cream to Eskimos. So no, he's really fantastic with that. And but my concern is that he's destabilizing the government. My concern is that he wants to be in power. He really wants to be in power, and he's using X, I feel, to destabilize foreign democracies. It is not at all a free speech medium, it's a hate speech medium. If you shadow ban people whose message you don't agree with, if you put them in an electronic, jail, that's not free speech at all. So, and I think he's propping up these, right wing governments around the world so that, they can be his puppet. They can deregulate his companies. He can become the world's first trillionaire, and then he can rule through them. I think he's very, very dangerous, and I don't think that President Trump should trust him at all.
Awesome. And I mean, someone said he's already in power. I mean, you should. I mean, from where I come from, when your friend get into power, I mean, you call a party because you've got a friend, in power, and you could get things easily from the corridors of power. Everyone is just shocked that you have a friend in power, and you are not in any way pleased with that. Could this be because you yourself wanted to be in power? You just found out that you couldn't or something.
How could it? No, I'm not even American, So Elon has an American citizenship.
Yeah.
I'm not American. No, I believe that one has to speak on on principle. I'm not transactional. I believe that you have to hold yourself to the highest ideals, and
Yeah.
just because you have a friend who is in the corridors of power, and yes, you could maybe benefit a lot from that, that's corruption, right? If I were to do that, if I were to be silent about a potential evil that's being committed just for my own benefit, that would be corruption, and that's not who I am. So I am speaking up now, unapologetically and loudly, because I do think that excuse me, that he's a cancer on the presidency, that he's a danger to this country, that he's a danger to democracies, and
All right.
that if given enough if given enough power, I think he could actually try to engineer a coup. He's not a person who wants to be number two anywhere. And the fact that he has backstabbed, a lot of people because of his insatiable lust for power should tell you something. So I think he's a danger to the United States, and I hope that President Trump understands that he would have gotten elected anyways in 2024. The moment he stood up after being shot, that sealed his victory. Yes, Elon put a lot of money in his campaign, but he's already made billions off of President Trump. He doesn't owe him anything. He owes the American people to be the best president he can be, and that's it. So I think he is a danger, and I think that a lot of other people who know Elon know this, but they don't have the courage to speak. I've received a lot of death threats, but I am speaking because I know Elon and I care about this country and I care about the world.
Dr. Philip, what do you think is the worst thing that could happen to you after speaking?
To me?
What could happen? Sorry?
To me, personally?
Yeah, you personally.
Well, I mean, as I said, I've received death threats, a number of which were credible, But as I've put it in my post, I'd rather die with dignity than live as a coward. And with that, I apologize that I have to run. Somebody is waiting for me, but I very much enjoyed your questions and your wonderful and very, very engaged audience. I was able to see some of the questions that they were asking. If you like, we can, I'd be happy to do this again.
Awesome. Let's do it again.
Yeah, it seemed that one of your audience members has a question about the Cambridge Declaration. I'd be happy to dive deeper into it if you'd like.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So, yeah, perfect.
Let's do it.
So to the extent that there are honest questions, people deserve honest answers, and so I'd be happy to do this. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a crazy day, and we've gone over time, but I'm happy we did.
You gave me 5 minutes, and you spent almost an hour, and I really
so
appreciate it.
I'm very delighted.
So
Thank you so much for all the hard work you've put in, and for your questions, and for your audience and your team. Really, really appreciate this exchange, and I hope we get to do it again.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
All the best. Bye.
You are welcome.